The day the music stopped, the Stratocaster slipped from Kurt's hands and crashed to the stage floor with a discordant wail that cut through the Seattle drizzle like broken glass. For the first time in his career, Kurt Cobain had dropped his guitar mid-song, and the entire Crocodile Cafe fell into a silence so deep you could hear raindrops hitting the skylights. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The venue was packed beyond capacity. Maybe 200 people crammed into a space meant for 150. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the sweet smell of rain-soaked flannel. Blue stage lights cast everything in that familiar underwater glow that made every grunge show feel like a fever dream. Kurt had been lost in the opening chords of Polly, his voice carrying that fragile, broken angel quality that made grown men weep. But then he saw her. Standing in the back corner, pressed against the brick wall by the emergency exit, was a woman who looked exactly like his mother. Not similar, exactly. The same platinum blonde hair, the same delicate bone structure, the same way of holding her left shoulder slightly higher when she was nervous. Wendy Cobain had been dead for 3 months. Kurt's fingers froze on the fretboard. The bass line Dave was laying down stumbled to a halt when Kurt's rhythm guitar went silent. Chris looked over from his bass, eyebrows raised in confusion. The crowd shifted restlessly, unsure if this was part of the show. "Mom!" The word escaped Kurt's lips before he could stop it, barely audible, but picked up by the sensitive stage microphones and carried through the PA system like a ghost's whisper. The woman at the back of the venue didn't move. She just stood there, watching him with eyes that held the same mixture of love and worry that had followed Kurt through his entire troubled childhood. The same eyes that had looked at him with desperate concern during his worst moments. The same eyes that had closed forever in a hospital room while Kurt was on tour, too far away to say goodbye. Kurt's guitar strap slipped from his shoulder. The instrument hit the floor with that awful crash, and suddenly the Crocodile Cafe felt less like a music venue and more like a cathedral where something sacred and terrible was about to happen. Kurt started, his voice cracking over the microphone. He stepped away from his mic stand, shaking his head. "I need a minute." He walked to the edge of the low stage and sat down heavily, his worn Converse dangling over the pit area where the most devoted fans usually pressed against the barrier. But tonight they stepped back, sensing that whatever was happening was too raw for proximity. Kurt rubbed his eyes with the heels of his palms. When he looked up, the woman was gone. Just an empty space by the emergency exit and the lingering scent of White Shoulder's perfume, the same perfume his mother had worn every day of her life. "She's not there," he said into the microphone, his voice hollow. "She can't be there. But I swear to God, I just saw my mom." A ripple went through the crowd. This wasn't Kurt Cobain, the rock star, talking. This was Kurt Cobain, the orphaned son, the kid who'd grown up angry and afraid, who'd channeled all that pain into 3-chord progressions and lyrics that bled honesty. "She died while I was in Phoenix," Kurt continued, talking more to himself than to the audience. "Lung cancer, 43 years old. I was supposed to be there. I was supposed to hold her hand. But I was here, playing shows, thinking there'd be time later. Always thinking there'd be time later." Behind him, Chris set down his bass and walked over. He didn't say anything, just sat on the amp beside Kurt's usual position, offering silent solidarity. Dave followed, perching on his drum stool, sticks hanging loose in his hands. "You know what the last thing I said to her was?" Kurt asked the crowd, his voice gaining strength but losing all pretense. "I told her I'd call her when I got to Seattle. That was 6 weeks ago. I never called." Someone in the crowd started to say something supportive, but Kurt held up a hand. "No, don't. Don't tell me it's okay, because it's not. Don't tell me she understood, because she didn't. She died thinking her son was too important for her, too busy making music to make time for the woman who used to sing me to sleep when I had nightmares." The venue had become something other than a concert hall. It felt like group therapy, like a confession booth, like the inside of someone's chest cavity where all the hurt lives. Kurt stood up and walked to his fallen guitar. He picked it up gently, cradling it like it might break. The headstock had a small crack from the fall, but it was still playable. Like most broken things in Kurt's life, it would function fine as long as you didn't look too closely at the damage. "She used to come to shows, you know," he said, testing the tuning. "Local ones. She'd stand in the back and try to look like she wasn't crying during the sad songs. After the show, she'd come up and tell me how proud she was, how she didn't understand the music, but she understood that it mattered to me." He strummed a gentle chord, not a song, just a sound to fill the terrible quiet. "The funeral was—" Kurt's voice broke completely. He tried again. "I couldn't speak at the funeral. They asked me to say something, and I just stood there like an idiot. All these words I make my living with, and I couldn't find a single one that was big enough for what I'd lost. A girl in the front row was crying openly now. She looked maybe 17, wearing a Nirvana t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big. Kurt noticed her tears, and something shifted in his expression. A recognition of shared pain, of the understanding that grief is the price we pay for love. "You know what I should have said?" Kurt asked, addressing the girl directly, but speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "I should have said that my mom taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real, that you can be angry and grateful at the same time, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up." He began picking a melody, something gentle and improvised, notes that seemed to fall from his fingers like rain. "I should have said that she never understood why I was so sad all the time, but she never stopped trying to make it better, that she'd leave little notes in my guitar case when I come home. Stupid things. Don't forget to eat. Call when you get there safely. Remember that you're loved." The melody grew stronger, more complex. Other musicians in the crowd recognized what was happening. Kurt was composing in real time, turning his grief into something beautiful and terrible and true. "I found a note she left me," Kurt continued, his fingers never stopping their gentle dance across the strings, "after the funeral, in my old room. It said, 'For my beautiful boy, the world is lucky to have your music, but I'm luckier to have had you. Love doesn't end when people do. It just changes shape.' The song that emerged wasn't like anything Kurt had written before. It wasn't grunge, wasn't punk, wasn't alternative rock. It was just a son singing about his mother, about time that runs out too fast, about love that doesn't know how to say goodbye properly. When the last note faded, the silence in the Crocodile Cafe was different than before. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of understanding, of shared loss, of the recognition that everyone in that room had loved someone they'd lost, or would lose someone they loved. Kurt looked up at the crowd, and for the first time since he'd seen the woman who looked like his mother, he smiled. "She would have liked this song," he said. "She always said my music was too angry, too loud. She would have liked this one." He set his guitar in its stand and walked to the front of the stage. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know you came here for a show, and instead you got this. But maybe this is more honest than any show I've ever played." Someone in the crowd started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. Not applause for a performance, but something deeper. Appreciation for witnessing something real, something vulnerable, something that mattered more than entertainment. Kurt picked up his guitar one more time. "One more song," he said, "for everyone who wishes they'd made that phone call, for everyone who's carrying around words they never got to say." What followed wasn't on any set list. It wasn't a Nirvana song at all. It was "You Are My Sunshine," played on a cracked Stratocaster in a smoky Seattle club, sung by a rock star who just remembered that before he was anything else, he was someone's son. The entire crowd sang along, 200 voices joining together in a song about love that's simple and complicated and infinite. And somewhere in the harmony of all those voices, Kurt heard something that sounded remarkably like his mother humming along from whatever place love goes when people die. After the show, Kurt sat alone on the empty stage for an hour, holding his guitar and thinking about phone calls he'd never make and conversations that would never happen. But he also thought about the note in his old bedroom, about love that changes shape but never ends, about the way grief can become gratitude if you're patient enough to let it. The woman by the emergency exit had been a stranger, of course, a coincidence, a trick of stage lights and cigarette smoke and a grieving son's desperate imagination. But in that moment, it had been enough to break him open, to let all the unspoken words spill out, to transform a concert into something like healing. He never played "You Are My Sunshine" in public again, but privately, in hotel rooms and backstages and quiet moments when the world got too loud, Kurt would pick up his guitar and sing his mother's favorite song, off-key, just like she used to, soft enough that only love could hear it, because love doesn't end when people do. It just learns new ways to make itself known. The bootleg recording of that night at the Crocodile Cafe became legendary among Nirvana fans, not for its musical quality, but for its raw emotional honesty. Kurt never spoke publicly about what happened that night, but those who were there said it changed something in him, made his music deeper, more connected to the part of himself that remembered being loved unconditionally. Years later, when interviewers asked about his songwriting process, Kurt would sometimes mention that his best songs came from conversations he wished he could still have. And occasionally, very quietly, he would add that sometimes love finds a way to finish those conversations even when it seems impossible. The crack in his Stratocaster's headstock from that night never got repaired. Kurt said it reminded him that beautiful things can be broken and still make music. That damage doesn't have to mean the song is over.